All right, welcome to another episode of Warrior versus Zombie. And as always, I have an amazing warrior guest to share with you today, Mike Raber. And I'll come back to him in a second, but let me remind you or let you know why you're here. Success is a journey, it's not a destination. As warriors, we all have a history of ups and downs, wins and losses that are all part of making us who we are up to this point, and they provide a foundation for our path forward. We all battle our inner zombie as well as those zombies in our world. And in each episode, I interview warriors who are aspiring leaders from all walks of life. We have entrepreneurs, artists, health practitioners, business owners, literally any inspired leader that has a story to tell. These warriors have a cause, unique value, and a vision that goes generations into the future, and today's guest is absolutely no exception. Mike Raber is an awesome warrior. He's a #1 international best-selling business author, speaker, and coach. His journey of leadership, building relationships, growing different businesses, along with writing different books, have helped to make him the coach, business, and wealth architect he is today. Mike works with coaches, influencers, and professionals who are striving to be thought leaders. He helps them fully understand their own superpowers or the core genius and step into their purpose as they help their clients obtain peace and profitability in their business. Mike created a powerful framework to help his clients remove false beliefs that often get in their way, such as dealing with the imposter syndrome and the many challenges faced by small business owners that culminates in their financial liberation through creating an effective community. So Mike Raber, welcome to Warrior versus Zombie. How are things in your world today?
That is good, actually. They're predicting we're supposed to get 8 to 10 inches of snow, but it's going to come tonight while we're all sleeping, hopefully. So, considering that I'm in Wisconsin and I'm across the street from the lake, I have the blessing of the lake keeping things warm, but also have the fact that we've been have had amazing weather over the last, well, winter for that matter. It's been warm. Today I think it's 40. Well, yes, it was 43 degrees. Today it's back down around 37, hence the snow coming. However, usually I would say the last 3 snowfalls we had, it snowed overnight. So it's nice. You wake up, you shovel the snow, and you go about your day. And the snowplows take care of the rest. We had one snowfall that came all day, and that was the only one all winter long that was actually an inconvenience. So I would have to say life here is very good, weather-wise especially.
So you just illustrated a very important warrior mindset thing, which I love. I lived in Michigan for 18 years in the Detroit area. I understand lake effect snow. I also understand kind of the part of the country you're living in. And when you say, oh, it's nice weather here, we may get snow. And I'm going, okay, so it's in Dallas right now. I think it's a little chillier today than yesterday. So it's in the 60s. And we'll be in the 80s by the end of the week. The concept of, oh, well, it snowed overnight gives me PTSD, because even though when I was working in the corporate world, even though snowing overnight was a beautiful thing, my kids loved it. And my wife loved it when she didn't have to get out in it. But what that meant to me where I lived was I would usually have several, even if it only snowed like 8 inches, I have several, maybe a foot plus or more against my garage door. So I would have to go out, shovel that out, then snow blow my whole driveway, get it down to the end of the drive, and then go back in and get ready for work, come back out only to find that the snowplows that had come through my subdivision and put a big pile of snow that I couldn't drive over at the end of my drive. So then in my suit and, boots, I went back to the end of the drive, shoveled it out. So then I still got to work sweaty, and, my shower didn't do any good. So anyway, the happiest day of my life, which was about 25 years ago, now was to sell my snowblower and my shovel, move to Dallas, and say, okay, this isn't happening again. I never say never because God has a sense of humor, but I have no intention of appreciating the beautiful weather you've just described. So, so
Yes.
I don't mind going on the. I don't mind going on a ski trip or going someplace to visit it. But if I have to go about my everyday life, it hopefully won't include shoveling a driveway anymore. But anyway, that's more than anybody signed up to get here. Anything else other than wonderful Wisconsin weather going on in your world today? Is everything good?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, we're actually we've been trying, my stepmother lives in Indianapolis, and we've been trying to go see her for the better part of 9 months now, but weather or other issues have always got in the way. This time, though, we finally said, okay, everybody's in town. We can make this trip. So we scheduled it for Saturday, unbeknownst, not knowing that the snowfall was coming. But as it looks like, it will be done by Friday morning, and we can still get about our business and drive to Indianapolis, which is about a 5-hour drive. So we're going to go there in the morning and spend the afternoon with her and then come back. So some might think of the idea of 5 hours one way and 5 hours back to have lunch with someone a bit on the crazy side, but for me, I love to drive, so I'm down with it, and I want to see her. So it all works in the end of the day. But so that's exciting anyway, knowing that we have this trip coming up.
Well, Mike, I got to tell you, as I said before, there's a lot of aspects of the life that you have that you, even if it's driving 10 hours to Indianapolis for a week, that kind of thing. I've done those things before. There's a lot of things that you've done that you don't want to do again, or they aren't. They may be part of your ideal day, but it's once in a blue moon. So I think that's brilliant. I love it. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We've gone a little bit long here, but not too much. And I want to get into your story. I want to hear about how you started and how you got to where you are today. So we'll take a quick break for the audio audience, hear a little bit of Ricky Jean Wright and our theme song, It's Not the Getting There. And we'll be right back with Mike Raber and Warrior versus Zombie. All right, we are back. And Mike, interesting check-in. Again, I think you gave me a little bit of PTSD there, reflecting on the 18 years that I lived in Michigan. But we'll get over that. So tell me, how did you get from where you started to where you are today?
Wow, a lot of hard work, a lot of faith, and a whole lot of, I guess, get up and go, not giving up, perseverance. And I was fortunate on one hand in that my entrepreneur and business journey started as a 12-year-old. And it came about how my mom and stepfather at the time got divorced, and I had to make a choice, live with her or live with him. I chose him because we got along really well. And he at the time was working as a head chef for Marquette University here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he, anyway, long story short, the school I was going to for middle school was like a war zone. Fights every day, breaking out. I came to the conclusion if I finished out the year there, I probably wouldn't finish it alive. So I dropped out of school as a 7th grader and started going downtown to Marquette where he was working and would help him in the kitchen. And I was listening to conversations that the cooks and stuff had, and I found that I knew I was passionate about business. And at some point, I would likely go back to school. I just knew I wasn't going there. And I started sitting in on all the business classes and the law classes, and they would bring an SBA to do different classes. So as a 7th grader, here I am sitting in these college classes, taking note after note after note, digesting everything that I could, and put together this vision of a business that would in time become a game changer in how business was going to be done. Because I looked at, even at a 12th grade, I could see all the things that were working and all the things that worked. And there was a big valley between the two. And hence this journey begun. I then ended up going back to school and going on to college, and found myself in Asia for 5 years, where my journey as education continued onward, where I started to work with business owners over there and learning how business was done in Asia and seeing things that worked and again things that didn't work. And it's been a continual journey from that point forward. And then my we have um, well, now 28-year-old and 25-year-old twins. But when our kids were born, I came to the conclusion that my wife had reached a place in her job where she really wanted to be at. So for her to stay home and take care of the kids wasn't really fair. And I knew at some point I wanted to teach businesses how to build a business, and not just start a business, but how to grow it and scale it and be able to turn the business into an asset, much like a golden goose. So I had to do so first. I'm a firm believer that don't just teach, do, learn, and then teach. And part of the learning comes through teaching. So I had this limousine that we used in the real estate office I was managing at the time. And when I resigned from the real estate office to take care of our kids, I started a limousine company because it was a very low startup. And I had set a goal at the time. It's kind of funny how goals work, where my father was talking about how he just made $100,000. It was a goal that he had an income. And I decided I was going to double it. Like every son wants to do, you want to outpass your father. So I set a goal to make $200,000. I was going to show him. So I went to work and built up this limousine company, and life was good. And except I had no money to show for it. And I reached $200,000. However, my business ended up going quite in the red in the process of getting there. So I hired a coach. And the first thing the coach did was ask, how much did you net? Now, keep in mind, I had a pretty good business foundation at that point. And I looked at him and says, net, what do you mean? And he says, out of all the money you made, how much did you spend? And I said, I spent $225,000. So he goes, okay, so you had a goal to double your dad's income and make $200,000, but you spent $225,000 to make $200,000. That's not a very good business goal. I suggest you adjust your thinking. Then he said, oh, so do me a favor and call your dad and ask him how much did he net that year, not how much did he gross. And of course, he netted 100,000 plus. So I learned the true value of net income. And anyway, what was really cool though was I then started to build a business, and he started mentoring me and teach me how to properly do it. And one of the things that he did was gave me this sheet that had different boxes I had to fill in answers, numbers to things I had to do. And one day we're on a call and he says, so what was the number for box 3? And my number was very bad because I got caught up with other things and forgot about it. And I'm starting to go into this story trying to justify the lack of what I was doing. And he goes, Mike, stop. And I said, yeah. And he goes, do you know why I gave you a small box to put a number in? And I said, no. And he says, because the box isn't big enough for a story. It's only big enough for a number. Give me a number and that number will tell your story. So I gave him the number and he says, not a very good story. I suggest you change that. So long story short, I was able to build the business up and eventually sold it. And we moved back to the Midwest. And I then started to look at what would be the next step in this process. And granted, there were a lot of obstacles from taking the business that was very much in the red at that point, bringing it into the black and I built it up 100% by referrals. I was able to then sell the business, and the business had value because of the book of business. And I built relationships with a lot of clients along the way, which are still friends to this day, which is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. But the whole idea was evolving on this vision. And it was like putting together this huge puzzle board. And every time I would hit an obstacle, I had two choices. I could either stop and scratch your head and say, well, I guess it's as good or as big as it's going to be. That wasn't an option. So I would find a way to move around it or move through it or find somebody else who had the key to the door that I needed to open. And onward it went. And it's been, I would say, a 40-year journey to develop this business. But it's finally at a point now, which is really cool because all the pieces of the puzzle have fallen in place. And in doing so, I've learned and put together all the different processes. I worked with the financial firm, became a financial advisor, and learned the financial component of business, knew the marketing part, knew how to build and grow a business, and learned all of that. But was nice was instead of just reading it in a book or reading in a textbook, I learned under trial, under fire. But then I was lucky because I also, by running a limousine company as an example, most of my clients, as I said, became friends, but they also became mentors. So here I'm in the car getting paid to drive these brilliant entrepreneurs around, people that were very successful in their own right, and they were teaching me about what they were doing and teaching me about how to better build my business. And because they knew I had a passion too, I didn't want to just learn to be able to build a better business. Yes, I wanted to do that, but I wanted to learn so I could help other people build a better business. And because of that, I became a sounding board for them, which has kind of carried with me all the way through to where my business is at today. Is a firm believer of, we first build ourselves, we continue to build those around us, we continue to build our community, and our business is a very good tool for doing that. But as long as we have an outward focus on what we're building, when the challenges come, one of my favorite phrases is, when our values are clear, our decisions are easy.
Mm-hmm.
So when those challenges come up, and we all have them in business, it's the why. What is the thing on the other side of that fence that we have to get to, that we have to build? And who are we able to indirectly or directly affect, improve their life by getting there? And once that happens, I think that's where the true warrior in us comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And it no longer becomes about ourselves. It's now about this higher, bigger cause. And because of that, we're able to break through the barriers. We're able to do what's necessary, fun, tiring, hard, painful, all of those things involved. But at the end of the day, it's getting to the finish line, not alone, but with those we are working alongside, those we are working to help. That makes it all worth it, at least in my world anyway. It's like one of my favorite sayings, and then I'll be quiet, is, by ourselves, we can do amazing things. Yet together, we can climb the highest mountain.
Yeah, I love that. And so, what I've heard, interestingly enough, you've shared a few zombies or encounters. One is, the system, if you will, the educational system in your early days, you had to overcome in terms of, because again, warriors move forward. There are things that come into our zombies that enter our path, into our minds. And what you've illustrated all along your story here is a warrior mindset, looking at the zombies as simply challenges, and then figuring out a way around, over, through whatever they might be as you move forward, and using that mindset. Any other challenges that you kind of glossed over? I mean, obviously there's some family challenges. You mentioned divorce, there's a lot of things there that get embedded in people's mindset, or in their limiting beliefs, as we talk about, right? That would keep some warriors stalled or whatever. Also, the concept of profit versus what you get to take home, your net versus the gross. That's also a mindset zombie that some people get into. It's like, okay, I'm making all this money, but it all goes out faster than it comes in. And so that's definitely a good warrior nugget there, and overcoming. Anything else in your path? You have family, you've done some moves here, a lot of challenges, a lot of things that can slow people down, knock them off track, whatever. Anything in there else that you overcame before we move into what you're doing today?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say, which is kind of interesting, because one of the bigger challenges that I had to overcome as a young adult was, a mentor challenged me to go to Taiwan and spend 5 years there, along this training, this educational path I was on. The only caveat was I had to stay there for 5 years. I could only buy a one-way ticket, and I could only bring $100, which meant that I would very quickly run out of money and end up homeless, which I did, and had to figure out how to survive for 5 years, or come back empty-handed, so to speak, and that I would come back and didn't accomplish what the challenge was for. And I did it. And 5 years later, came back, and everything was a success, and life went on. But what was interesting was, I had read hundreds of books, taken hundreds of courses, done these things like going to Taiwan with a one-way ticket, etc., that the average person would look at me and say, "You're nuts." In fact, they often did. However, even though I overcame that, I kept hitting a glass wall in my business. I kept hitting a glass wall in my success. And it wasn't until I was asked to write a chapter in a collaborative book project and I chose to write it on imposter syndrome that it really dawned on me that my biggest dragon to slay, so to speak, was imposter syndrome. And I started to research and talk to people, going back to clients that I had and asking them, what is it that you did? And did you experience imposter syndrome? And everyone I talked to, no matter how successful they all either experienced it a portion, a period, a season in their life, or it was something they would commonly have to wrestle with. And it dawned on me that if they can deal with imposter syndrome and yet become great warriors in their own right, if I, even though I have overcome these things, am dealing with it, and yet I know my path has many more challenges ahead. In order to overcome them, I can't deal or be held down by imposter syndrome because it would continue to limit my growth. And it wasn't until I really dug inside and worked on it and figured out how to, and not so much how to overcome imposter syndrome, but figured out that it wasn't me. It was a faulty belief that I had. And it was as easy as snapping my fingers and making the belief go away as in no longer accepting it as being reality, that things really started to turn around and that my business started to take off in kind of leapfrog ahead of where it was because I was no longer in the way. It was kind of funny because I was the captain of the ship, but I was also the iceberg in front of the ship all at the same time. And it wasn't until I could get the iceberg out of the way and clearly see the vision. Even though I knew what the vision was as a 12-year-old onward, I still had to overcome imposter syndrome. So I would say back to your question that was easily the biggest zombie I had to overcome. And I'm so glad that I was able to figure out how to do that because it no longer, yes, I experience it from time to time, but just figure out a way to reframe that thought and move forward.
Well, one of the things is, and I think we're ready to talk about today because it sounds like one of the things I always love about Warriors is we pay attention to our journey and the things that the zombies that we have to overcome. Imposter syndrome was one. I even mentioned it in your introduction. So I figure that's kind of like your focus today of coaching. But one of the things I love is that a lot of us shift our focus from, okay, I've overcome this to I now can see that reticular activating system. I can see that attribute in other people, and I can now help them on their journey do that, which sounds like where you're at with your coaching. So let's do this. I want to take a quick break for the audio audience and hear another snippet of It's Not the Getting There. And we'll be right back to hear about what you're doing today, why you're doing it, what kind of impact you want to have as we get into the third segment of It's Warrior versus Zombie with Mike Raber. Fascinating. I love it, Mike. And, at some point we'll have to maybe have a follow-up podcast. I want to hear about, I really would love to, if we had more time, to talk about that Taiwan experience and that $100 in your pocket and who the heck made you do that. That's the other thing. I'm not only fascinated that as you pointed out, that most people wouldn't do that. Number two is it makes it seem a little crazy for doing that. But anyway, I'm not going to go there because that is,
yes.
I mean, again, no growth. There's one truth in that, and whether you exhibit it in such a dramatic way or not, it's that no growth occurs within our comfort zone. So obviously you were pushed out of that and had to learn things that you wouldn't have learned if you'd have just stayed nice and comfortable and in the Midwest and you moved to Asia. So anyway, but maybe we'll have to do another episode on that. But anyway, let's talk about why you're doing what you're doing today.
Okay, definitely. And it really comes down to over the last, one of the gifts, as much as I always hate to use the word gift over the last 3 years, because it's a hard time for so many people. But I was working with a friend who was still a friend, but colleague, And she had this huge vision as well that she wanted to build this organization. And it involved being around people, it involved networking, it involved being able to get out and do things. And just as we started to put this piece puzzle or put the piece of puzzle pieces together,
Mhm.
everything shut down. And we went from not being in the network to being stuck in front of a screen, not being able to go out and talk to people, but being stuck at home. And everything came crashing to a halt. And I was talking to her and I said, "So what are you thinking?" And she says, "I don't know what to think. I'm terrified." And I said, "Well, is your passion to help and be a supportive conduit for small business owners?" And she said, "Yes, very much so." I said, "Would it be fair to say that right now, small business owners are also in a world of hurt and they don't know what tomorrow's going to look like and they're terrified of what's coming?" She says, "Oh, definitely. I am. Why would they be any different?" I said, "Then let's put together a summit and bring in people from different walks of life and have 10 days devoted to the small business owner, talking about all sorts of business topics, and we'll do it as a free resource." And she said, "Can that be done?" I said, "Why not? Let's do it." So we decided within 3.5 weeks, we were going to host the summit, and we built out the platform, and it was 3.5 weeks of 15-hour days. However, at the end of 3 weeks, I never did that before. It was learning under fire, definitely. But we built out this really cool platform. We put the summit on. She put together a Facebook page that had like 10,000 people go through this program, and it was an amazing experience. So we continued to charge forward, and then we decided that we're going to do a summit a 2.0. And the people that now we're working with said, "So are you going to do it next year?" And we said, "No, we're thinking in about 2.5 to 3 months." And the average response was, "Are you crazy? It takes 6 months to a year to put on a summit, especially to the magnitude you're talking about." And I thought to myself, I'm sure glad they didn't talk to us before we did the first one, because we did 3.5 weeks. We probably wouldn't have done it. We realized what it could take. So long story short, that really showed me that there was a huge passion for people, A, that had a story. There was a huge need for a platform or for a place where people can go to get relevant information. And even though there's a lot of different conduits out there where people can access that information, I started thinking back to myself and my journey with dealing with imposter syndrome, and how one of the visions that I got was to build this community of 100 million people. And the idea behind that is to have it as a collaborative community of people working together, nonprofits, businesses, all working together as a whole. Knowing that great things happen, movements happen, etc., across the globe, but something flares up and it goes down. Something flares up and it goes down. Let's say Hands Across America as example. Huge song, huge movement, and it was everywhere for a few months. Now, most people, if you said that, they'd have to think about what I was talking about. And I had the opportunity to meet with Ken Cragen, who it was his brainchild to put that together. And that got me thinking that if something that powerful can flare up and then go back to life as normal, how can we keep that from happening? And the idea of 100 million strong is to make sure that that doesn't continue to, that there's a platform, there's a conduit where when something cool happens, it is expanded out and expanded out. And not to digress on that, that's a conversation for another day.
Right, right.
But knowing that the power of 100 million people working together to impact and improve the world can start to have this impact that the vision I had as a kid could launch off of. That said, I then started thinking of all the people I talked to, what were the three common denominators? They had a story that they could share and wanted to share, but they didn't believe they could do it or they didn't know how to do it. They wanted to improve the world and they wanted to create financial liberation along the way. So I then revamped my business and tie, dialed it into, and also if I wanted to build a community of 100 million people, at that time I knew had three friends and a dog, long ways off from 100 million people. So I had to figure out it can't just be my stories. It can't just be my community, even though it continues to evolve. It has to be a lot of other game changers. And I was talking to my daughter and she looked at me and she says, "You know, Dad, I believe that we are all born with the superpower. It's our job to figure out what it is and then to share it with the world." And at that, she then looked at me as a 20-year-old at the time and said, "You have a powerful story, but yet you don't share it. If you'd got out of your own way, Dad, can you imagine the impact you could have?" And I took that to heart and started thinking, if I'm like that with all the things I've done, how
Mhm.
many other people are there like that? So now what I'm doing is building out a space, a safe space where people can come and share their story and put together a framework around how to, a person has a story as small or as large as it is, much like you talked about at the beginning. We all have a journey we're on, and we're making movement along that pathway, and there's someone else behind us. I kind of like to refer to it as the 3-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. The 3-year-old, who we look at as a silly little toddler, gets up and walks across the room. And to us, we say, oh, what a cute little 3-year-old. But to the 2.5-year-old, they look at the toddler and say, wow, I wish I could walk like that.
Mhm.
Now imagine if the 3-year-old were to walk over to the 2.5-year-old, reach down, pick up its or her hand, and the two of them stand up and they walk across the room together. How much faster could that 2.5-year-old learn to walk? So to the 2.5-year-old, the 3-year-old's an influencer.
Right.
And if a toddler could have that impact, who are we not to have such an impact? So back to the answer to your question, now I am building out and sharing this platform, people teaching them how to get their voice out there, use their voice, whether it's through speaking, through a podcast, much like what we're doing now, through writing a book or writing a chapter in a book. There's different means of how that can be done, but giving them the safe space to show up and share their story, and then in doing so, having the faith that their story is going to impact someone else, or maybe millions of people, who knows? And in doing so, they're going to also be able to create financial liberation through the process. And as more and more people come in and say, wow, I got a story, I want to share that, or I have this core genius and I know someone else can resonate from it, let's do it together. Going back to my saying, that's
Right.
how we're going to hit the 100 million people.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, you've answered my next question already, the impact you hope to have. And that's again, uh, you've kind of laid out the whole purpose for this podcast, and whatever, sharing warrior stories. We all have a story, whether we realize it or not. And there's the 2-year-old behind us. So I kind of I like the term Sherpa. I've been down this path before. I'm a little further down the path. It doesn't mean that I've got it all figured out, but I've learned how to walk, and now I can pick you up. And that's one of the things where I could see it and I could feel it in your story. Is that's the thing I love about warriors, is once we figure it out and we get down the road and we realize how blessed we are from overcoming the zombies we've overcome, learning and seeing some impact, that we often take our focus off ourselves, right? And then turn around and look for other people that we can lift up and help. And, through all kinds of vehicles, getting our story out, sharing our vision, getting it going. That's kind of the goal, or the vision of this podcast. So you've hit on that very well. It sounds like, as I already knew, because I've known you a little bit, we're very aligned, as I say. We're very aligned. Well, let's do this. We're going to be a little long, but that's okay. So stay with us if you're here. We're going to take another quick break for the audio audience. Hear the final segment of It's Not the Getting There, and we'll be back. And Mike, we've covered a lot of stuff. I mean, you've got a lot of things. When we come back and give you a minute to think about it, but I want to know, if we take away anything from this podcast, what would you want us to take away? Okay, Mike, this is fun, and I knew it would be. And we've overcome our own challenges in putting this together, and I'll overcome the editing challenges as we get ready to publish it, and it'll be awesome. So tell me, as I said before the break, if we take away anything from this discussion, this podcast, your story, your vision, what would you want us to take away?
Simple. I would say break it down into two thoughts. Thought number one is keep moving forward and have faith that the people you need, the solutions you need to bring together whatever it is that you want to accomplish will show up at the right time. Not necessarily at the time you hope or want, but at the right time for the maximum impact of what it is that you are creating. So stay in faith but keep moving. The other one goes back to my daughter's phrase, is we are all born with the superpower, and it's our job to figure out what it is and to share with the world. So whatever your core genius is, whatever your superpower is, find a way to get it out there, because somewhere there's a person waiting for you to show up, if only you will.
Brilliant. So I can break it down into what I heard there, which are two wonderful warrior nuggets. One is, when the student's ready, the teacher will show up, in terms of, and and I don't mean just in a educational standpoint, but the reality of it is, it's not, I can't do this. It's how can I do this? It's actually looking at the thing and saying, I know there's a way, and I have faith that I can do it. And then that faith of, and I love the other part of it, that is also, is continue to move forward. You can't steer a parked car, right? So you've got to keep moving forward. And so too many times I see warriors that stop and look around, and they, get frozen in place, so to speak. And so that's also brilliant. And then the other one is, we all have brilliance. We all have a superpower. As I say in my coaching myself, we all have a unique reason for being on the planet. We have unique value, and we have a unique vision that needs to be shared. And there's other people just waiting for us to be the teacher or the Sherpa that helps them down the road. So those are brilliant. Well, let's do so how can we stay in touch? I know, this will be up on our Be Connected channel. It'll be on my YouTube channel. People can come back and listen to this, and I'll have your links and stuff in the show notes. But how do we stay in touch with you on the Be Connected platform? Obviously, it's Mike Raber, but beyond that.
Well, within the Be Connected platform, the show is the Superhero Show. So that's one way. The business, 100 million strong, that is 100 million strong, spc.com. So there's a lot of information that talks about the vision and what we're building out there. But keeping things simple, especially for those of you who are listening to this while driving, my name, MikeRaber.com, will bring you to my signature page, which has my social media handles. It has, again, the access to the website. It has access to podcasts, where hopefully, David, you will be on very soon, and access to other awesome information. So rather than racking your brain on where and how and when to go, just go to MikeRaber.com, and I hope you'll find it beneficial.
I'm certain they will, Mike. And MikeRaber.com, that's an easy one. Or if you're already on the Be Connected platform, you can find Mike, and he's an absolute wonderful connection to have. And I'm glad that this platform connected us as well through the process. So anyway, well, I could talk to you forever, as it feels like we already have. I know we had a little prep time and some other things, but we're going to have to land the plane for this episode of Warrior versus Zombie. We'll be back next week, same time, same channel, and we'll hear another warrior. But for now, let's hear the final outro of It's Not the Getting There, and we'll see you next week on Warrior versus Zombie.